My life was saved because I woke up late. When I was in elementary school, but I think it was 3rd grade or 4th grade, one day I was woken up in a rush by my mother. My mother had overslept, and since she was the one who always woke me up in the morning, this meant that I had also overslept and missed the school bus. As far as I remember, school started at 8 a.m. and the bus was supposed to pick me up at 7 a.m. But it was already around 6:40 and I was still in my pajamas. I hadn't even had breakfast yet. My mother decided to tell the bus driver to go ahead without me and decided to take me to school herself. This way, I would have plenty of time to get ready. I was sitting at the dining table having my breakfast. I was still in my pajamas and it was around 6:50. We heard the bus arriving about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mother poked her head out the door into the morning, and she made a hand gesture indicating that we wouldn't be taking the bus today. She closed the door and came inside, but the bus hadn't left. There was a knock on the door, and when my mother opened it, she was met by a man in a bus driver uniform. The man said he was the substitute driver, filling in for the regular driver who was sick today. He mentioned that he knew he had arrived a few minutes early because he wanted to start early since he wasn't familiar with the route. My mother explained to him that since we woke up late, she would be taking Ren to school herself. The driver visibly got annoyed and said he could wait a few minutes since he was already ahead of schedule. My mother insisted that no, we wouldn't be ready to leave in a few minutes and told him to go ahead. He seemed to be annoyed by this, but he turned around, got on the bus, and left. I continued having my breakfast, and at this point I still hadn't put on my school uniform. But right at 7 o'clock, another bus pulled up in front of my house. My mother thought this was strange and went outside to talk to them. She came back inside looking horrified, but she didn't say anything about it. And she told me to get ready for school. I didn't know what was happening at the time, but my mother would tell me a few years later. When my mother went to the second bus, she saw that it was being driven by my usual bus driver and was full with all the other children who were normally on the route. Meanwhile, the other bus was empty. My mother asked the driver about his substitute driver and if he was sick. But the man told her, "I never said I was sick." He said, "There is no substitute driver on my route." The driver, in a panic, immediately called the central office and told my mother to go inside and call the police to report this incident. There was absolutely no one on my driver's route that day. Whoever this was, they were most likely a child abductor targeting me. I never heard anything about it again, but if I had gotten on that bus, I probably would have. I wouldn't have been able to reach school or home, and if my mother hadn't overslept that day, I would have been on that bus too. What was that woman planning about me? Once I went to a bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I hadn't been to many bars until then. My friend had already started drinking on the way to the bar, so by the time we got there he was already quite drunk. When we sat at the bar, a cute girl came up to us. Then she talked to me and my friend. She said she was the island itself, and I noticed she had really bright red hair. I thought she dyed it. It wasn't pretty, but it wasn't natural. Anyway, this girl was flirting with me and my friend. My friend could already tell she was very drunk. To be honest, I pretended to be drunk too, because it seemed to be working for my friend. I just didn't know if she was trying to get free drinks. So I told her we didn't have much money. She offered to buy us drinks. She kept buying us drinks, and I started to get confused about who she liked between me and my friend, because throughout the conversation, she was flirting with both of us. My friend went to the bathroom. He was thrown out by the bouncers before he could come back. He was very drunk. Candace and I went out with him. She kept telling him to come with her. My friend was so out of it that he could barely respond to her. I told him that he was too drunk and I wouldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house he didn't know. Candace kept insisting that she would take care of him. But I said no to her, because I had to stay with him. I was more sober than him and he was my responsibility. I told him the only way he could go somewhere was if I followed him. I assumed he thought I was jealous or being stubborn. But my friend could barely stand at that point and lost interest himself. She immediately started flirting with me and offered to hire a taxi to take my friend home. Then she said we could go to her place alone. At this point, I had had a few drinks and was quite drunk, so I agreed. We put my friend in the taxi and walked towards her car. I stumbled slightly as we headed to her car. "Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said. I smiled back. "Yes," I said. I don't know why, but I was feeling a bit shy and anxious. Everything seemed very easy for me. That's why I was feeling uneasy. We got into his car and started down the street. Stopped at the liquor store. Would you like to drink a bit more? He offered. It's on me. I didn't want to drink more than I already had. I was already feeling good and wanted to carry myself through the rest of the night. Sometimes when I'm drunk, I make myself look foolish, so I was going to act the same way. I told him I was already drunk enough, but he insisted. Not wanting to look like a wimp, I told him to bring me a glass of liqueur and some apple juice on the side. He went into the shop and came out with much more than just a glass. I thought he wanted to drink more, which is why he got so much. During the car ride, we were taking turns drinking from the bottle, but he was only taking small sips. I tried to take small sips too, but he kept passing the bottle to me and telling me to drink more. Feeling something was off, I finished the apple juice first and was spitting the alcohol into the apple juice bottle. Then without him noticing, I was pouring it out the window. I didn't want him to know that I was pretending to be more drunk than I actually was. In fact, he believed I was completely drunk when I was just tipsy. I took a few more sips of the liqueur, and I finished the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I called him by the wrong name a few times to get a reaction from him. He didn't react at all. He continued to let me call him Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I initially thought he lied to me about his name. We went to his house. I pretended to trip and stumbled towards the front door. He helped me inside by holding me up. He opened his unlocked front door. We entered his house and he closed the front door. Then he locked it. I thought it was strange, but I assumed he didn't want anyone to see us. I told him I needed to use the bathroom. I went into his bathroom. I locked the door and looked in the mirror. I felt strange and sensed something was wrong. I turned on the sink to make noise and vomited the liquor I had drunk. I flushed the toilet. I went to the sink and started drinking tap water with my hands to sober up. I didn't want to be drunk, but I still wanted to hang out with him, so I wanted to act like I was drunk. I turned off the sink, and I could hear him talking to someone. Drunk, barely able to stand. You do it? Who was he talking to, and what was he going to do? I left the bathroom and walked towards the living room. The moment I entered the living room, I saw him entering another room. All I could see was the back of his head. He was entering another room with that strange, very bright red hair. I couldn't see his face or anything. I just saw him walking quickly towards the room. The living room was quite dark. Hey, where are you going? I mumbled as if I were drunk. He turned back to the dark living room and walked towards me. Let's go to my room, he said. I looked at his bright red hair and then into his eyes. Her eyes and face were different. It was another girl with the same hair. That's when I realized. It was another girl wearing the same wig. From the beginning, those red, unnatural hair were a wig. For whatever reason, the previous girl had also changed. My heart felt like it was going to stop, but I continued to act as if I didn't know she was a different girl. I smiled at her and said that I just needed to go to the bathroom once more and apologized for being so drunk. No problem, hurry up. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. Again, I heard someone whispering something. This time, I think it was a male voice whispering. Honestly, I wasn't concentrating on exactly what was being said. Something sketchy was going on, and I needed to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out. And I ran faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't look back or anything. I just ran towards the backyard. I jumped over fences, passed through someone else's backyard, and got onto a road. And I ran towards the main road. I kept running until I saw a store open 24 hours on the main road. I stopped in front of the store. I called a taxi and went to my own home. The day after this incident, I went back to the house where it happened with a few friends to see what was going on. There was no one there. No car. No people. Nothing at all. Just an empty house. It turned out the house was a summer rental. I learned that whoever those people were, they entered the house and used it just for that night and never returned. Here, I am asking you the question that the person who shared this with us asked. What were he and they planning that night? What was their purpose? Why were they trying to get his friend and him drunk? If you think they might have been robbing them, they couldn't have been because he paid for their drinks and taxi fare. So, why could the same fairy tale? Were there two different girls? Also, what was that male voice? I'm on a killer's death list. Years ago after high school, I was in a bad part of my life. My foster family kicked me out of the house after I graduated. They didn't help me find a place to stay. So I lived in my car for a few months. One day at work, I met a few guys with a metal head. I had seen them around town, and all my other friends knew who they were. Everyone liked them. Within a few months, we became friends, and they offered me to move in with them. I accepted. Looking back now, I wish I had stayed in my car. My two roommates were brothers named Andrevi and Seth. They were in a music band. They also believed in occultism and things like that. Let me open a small parenthesis here. Occultism means believing in things that are not in science and religion. Astrology and astral travel, chakras, meditation, and so on. Anyway, let's get back to our topic. I never believed in such things. But I'm not someone who tells others what they should believe in. They had allowed me to live with them for a few months without paying rent. I was going to complain myself. As the only woman in a house full of young men, I was always watching my back. You never know who you can trust. It seems I was right to be worried. Over time, their friends started staying with us for longer periods, sometimes for weeks. Their friends were another group of brothers they went to school with. There were 5 brothers in total, but only 2 of them stayed with us regularly. The younger brother, Mark, was very kind. He would clean up after himself and always help with the housework. The other brother had a mind full of mental issues. From what I saw, he had used bad powdered substances in the past, and this had turned into a religious type of psychosis. He had even been imprisoned for attacking a woman with a Bible. He would often look into your eyes and say he could see how you would die. Once he told me that I was possessed by a demon, and that my soul needed to be cleansed. Everyone in the house knew he had these issues, but he was their friend. They helped him during his tough times and gave him a place to stay. Otherwise, he would have been on the streets. After the things he told me, I was always on edge around him. No one else seemed as worried as I was. They should have been... Guys, I'm going to cut the video short. You probably hate hearing this. I'm not too thrilled about it either, but I have to say it. If you're not subscribed, you can subscribe. You can also like the video and leave a comment. So, let's get back to the video. One day I was sleeping and my phone rang. It was my boss calling. He asked if I could come to work an hour early. It was only 12 o'clock. I was broke and had nothing better to do. So, I accepted. I got up and started getting ready to go. When I entered the living room, I saw Mark and Andre on the couch and Adam sitting on the floor next to the TV. He was watching Bible videos on YouTube. This was quite a usual situation. I minded my own business. I said goodbye and left to go to work. When my shift was almost over, the phone rang. It was answered by my boss. He handed the phone to me and said, "For you." I was just a cashier. So from my phone, I thought it was a friend who couldn't reach me. I picked up the phone and heard a male voice I didn't recognize. "Hello, I'm Inspector Willis. Something happened today involving you, and you need to come to the station to talk about it." I left work immediately. I thought one of the brothers had been arrested for selling powdered sugar or something else. I was very wrong. I went to the station and was taken inside. An officer took me to the camera room. He escorted me to a small, uncold room. He gave me a water and left me alone for about 30 minutes. I was losing my mind thinking about what could happen. He came back in and told me that Adam had stabbed and killed Andrev around 1 o'clock. I was in shock. I left the house an hour before the incident, and everything seemed fine. I asked if there had been a fight. The detective told me there was no fight and it seemed like the incident happened suddenly. I gave my statement to the police and left there with nowhere to go. I was still in shock and confused. Our home was a crime scene. So, since the police didn't give me any information about the incident, I went to another friend's house to watch the news bulletin. In the following few days, information began to be revealed. The man hadn't stabbed Andrevi just once. He had stabbed him multiple times. After the murder, still holding the murder weapon, he ran towards Rola. He called 911 and told them what he had done. I watched the news bulletin in horror. We knew he was unstable, but he had completely confessed to the brutal murder, and he had given his notebook to the police. Apparently, he planned to kill all his siblings and his friends too. And he was planning to kill me. He thought that demons had entered us and that this was the only way to save us. Fortunately, none of the other victims were there that day. Unfortunately, Mark witnessed the murder, but he luckily escaped. If I hadn't received that call from my boss, I wouldn't be alive today. The video ends here. We saw 3 interesting and strange stories. I personally found them quite strange while reading and talking to those people. These stories, things I never believed could be real. And indeed, life is very strange. Like in the story of the girl who was late, even falling asleep for just 10 minutes can determine whether your life is saved or not. It's very interesting. And the people who tried to get the man drunk and kidnap him were probably organ traffickers or something. The real world is a very scary place. Anyway, the video ends here. It's really over.
Here are my social media accounts. You can follow me. Until the next video then, goodbye.